Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we have a very interesting review of a very interesting looking Carnotaurus figure. Of course, you know me being the biggest Carnotaurus fan ever. Of course, I have to buy every single variation of a Carnotaurus that I see, and I recently spotted this one. Actually, it's been a little while since I spotted it. I originally spotted it on Amazon, and I had added it to my wish list on there, but before I ever had a chance to purchase it, which was only like a couple of days after I added it on there, it disappeared off of there. The link was no longer available. I was unable to find the figure. However, it recently has shown back up again a few times on eBay as well as AliExpress. So when I saw it showing back up on there, I purchased it pretty quickly and it just finally arrived. But it's a really cool looking Carnotaurus. However, it's also a little goofy looking, I would say. But it was interesting enough that I definitely wanted to get a hold of it, and we have it now here to take a look at with you guys. However, as far as whoever makes the figure, I have no idea, because unfortunately, I cannot read anything that this says other than the fact that it says dinosaur animal, but we can see a logo right there for the company, so if any of you can actually read that and tell me who exactly it is that makes this, that would definitely be appreciated for sure. But there's not really much of anything else going on here on the inside of the tag information-wise that I can figure out, but the figure again looks pretty cool. Nothing that's overly amazing, but definitely a fun-looking Carnotaurus, so let's go ahead and get a closer look at it right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt of the Carnotaurus, you can see some pretty nice detailing up here on the face, but it's nothing that's overly impressive. The sculpt and detail, for the most part, like up here, it just primarily looks like they used the same kind of texture stamp to give it just that kind of almost like an osteoderm-like scaling to the face. On the lower jaw, it does look a little nicer. You can see a little bit more variation as far as the scales go down there, but I don't think it looks bad by any means. I actually think it looks pretty darn nice overall. You have a nice darker coloration here around the eye and a yellow eye with a black pupil, which does appear to have a gloss coat and is actually painted picture perfect. And sometimes when you get figures from like China and they kind of appear like they're bootlegs, they usually come really sloppily as far as the paintwork goes, but this one looks pretty darn good overall, and just looking at the eye right there is a prime example of that. But even more proof would be to look in here at the mouth. You can see that the teeth, for the most part, appear to be painted really nicely. There doesn't seem to be any sloppiness at all. You actually have some pretty nice sculpt and detail inside the mouth as well, and you have the tongue sticking up right here, and you can also see again as I'm turning it that there is an incredibly nice gloss coat added to the figure inside the mouth. Very nice, realistic, very saliva-like look in there. If we turn it over here and take a look at the opposing side of the head, again, the actual head sculpt here looks really good. It almost looks like the Papo Carnotaurus, actually, I think, with the way that the sculpt and detail looks. I don't know if this is, in fact, a bootleg or they've used the head sculpt of the Papo Carnotaurus. I have no idea because, again, I don't know much about the figure itself, but I can tell you it really does have quite the nice looking head sculpt, that's for sure. Moving down here into the neck, you can see lots of very nice looking detail, but it's a little muted as far as like the actual texturing of the skin goes in the neck region. You can see there's like lots of creasing going on. You have a few osteoderms and some nice ridges that run along the spinal column, but when you get nice and close, you can see that the actual texturing as far as like the scale detail or skin texture is a little smooth and not really all that great looking, that's for sure. But once we get down here into the body, again, the very large scaling picks back up, and you can see that quite nicely throughout the sculpt of the figure. There is some pretty decent detailing as far as the scale detail goes down here. Nice osteoderms running along the dinosaur as well. You have the very nice looking arm sculpts here. They're a little bit probably bigger than they should be, honestly, as far as a Carnotaurus goes, but they're still pretty fun looking. No painted nails or anything, unfortunately. Looking over here at this side of the neck, at least we do have lots of creasing going on here. I think a little more so than we had over here. It's pretty similar, actually. But it looks pretty decent, but again, a bit of a muted look as far as the actual skin texturing goes. But just like on the opposing side, once we get down here into the body, you can see some pretty nice scale detail throughout the entire Carnotaurus. I will say that he looks very thin, like super awkwardly thin in the stomach region, which makes them look a little bit weird, but at the same time, I mean, it doesn't look terrible for sure. You can see a nice darker coloration that runs down along the spine of the dinosaur, along those ridges that run the course of the back. A few little skin folds and stuff going on down here. The Carnotaurus is actually standing in a bit of an upright position. Almost looks like he's either fighting with something or jumping up again, just like a lot of people seem to be doing with their dinosaur sculpts, and almost makes it look like he's snapping at a pterosaur or something. And due to the positioning of the body, it almost looks like he's jumping and snapping, so maybe that could potentially be the motivation behind the positioning of the body. But again, coming down here, you can see a little bit of a gray dry brushing that they've applied here and there to the figure, which I think does look quite nice. You can sort of pick up on the hip bone a little bit, but not too much. Some decent musculature as we move down the leg here. You can see a little bit of like a seam or something right here, which is a little bit of an eyesore on the figure, but it's not the worst. And then we come down into the foot sculpt. The foot sculpt actually does look quite nice, really nice scoots down the toes. Unfortunately, there isn't any nail paint, which is very strange because he was such a nicely painted head up here with really nice careful paint on the eyes and teeth and everything, and then the horns as well, actually painted with a nice brown, but you don't have any nail paint down here on the feet. Very, very strange. We do have the dew claw present, but just no paint down there. And then coming back up here into the tail of our Carnotaurus, we could see more osteoderms picking up some more really nice scale detail as we move down the length of the tail. The tail does have a pretty strong curve right there at the end, and you can see some decent sculpt and detail down here on the underside of our Carnotaurus as well. Nice dry brushing with a black that's been applied on the underside of the legs. And actually, here's another little spot with the logo here, which I think says New Cana Animal Kingdom, which maybe is a clue as to who made the figure. But again, some more nice detailing here on the underside of the Carnotaurus. And then looking over here, again, you have the decent looking sculpt of the leg, the hip bone, again, elaborated a little bit. Just like on the other side, though, we have that very ugly seam. It actually looks a lot worse over here on this side. But then moving down in the foot area, you have a nice foot sculpt yet again, just like we had seen on the previous side. And then the tail over here as it leads out into that somewhat awkward looking curve. But the figure as a whole, I think, is pretty fun, but definitely not the best Carnotaurus you're ever going to see, that's for sure. One thing about the figure, I actually thought that this was going to be a hard plastic when I had initially ordered it, but it's actually kind of a soft, squishy feel, which I did not expect, because most times when I get a figure like this from China, it usually comes as like a hard plastic. Unfortunately, and some people don't really like that soft, squishy type feel, this one is in fact that. The legs are hard, and they're definitely solid, but the body itself is that soft, squishy feel pretty much everywhere. So, again, something to take into consideration if you are considering purchasing this. But as far as a size goes, for a length from the tail to the head, you're looking at about 10.5 inches or about 26.5 centimeters. And then for a height to the tip of the snout, might be a little hard to really see from your angle, but it's about 7 inches or about 18 centimeters, somewhere around that range. And for a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon next to our Carnotaurus figure. Next to these guys, you can definitely see that the Carnotaurus does sport some pretty decent size, especially as far as its height goes, but it is standing in a very upright position. So, I guess that would probably be why. If it were crouched down, it would still sport some pretty decent size, but I don't think it would look quite as impressive. But next to these figures, hopefully you should have a decent idea roughly of what the size of the figure is. So this Carnotaurus is definitely something. It's not the best Carnotaurus. I've said that quite a few times already, but I am pretty happy to have it in my collection. It's a very interesting pose on the figure. It doesn't look like it's meant to be kind of like that tail dragging type of a Carnotaurus. It is clearly in a tripod position due to the tail kind of helping it balance. But again, I think it's just meant to be sort of a dynamic pose, and it's not meant to imply that the dinosaur walked with its tail on the ground, especially with the way the tail kind of curves. If it were just like that typical tripod type of a old school look for the dinosaur, the tail I don't think would have that kind of a curve. So it's just kind of part of the current movement being shown through the sculpt of the dinosaur in the somewhat weird looking, almost like a jumping position to the Carnotaurus, making it look like it's leaping up in the air almost to grab a hold of something. But as a whole, I think the sculpt is okay. It's just got some areas, like especially in the neck, it's just really, really smoothed out as far as the skin texturing goes. And I feel like with the amount of scale detail the figure has elsewhere, and then the lack of scale detail in the neck just kind of makes it look a little weird, and that whole area is a little rough looking, I would say. But if you get past the neck region, the actual scale detail and everything does look pretty nice. There's some nice osteoderms throughout the sculpt, as well as some nice ridges that run along the spinal column. I think the overall appearance to the figure, sculpt-wise, is pretty nice as far as like the fine detailing goes. Again, notwithstanding the neck area, but the actual positioning of the body looks very strange and almost goofy at times, so I'm not a gigantic fan of the actual positioning of the body and the somewhat awkward look that it has, but they have done a decent job on the sculpt. Again, I will say the head sculpt really looks like the Papo Carnotaurus, so I kind of get the feeling that potentially this could have been bootlegged, but I don't know for sure. I can't really say as I don't have any surefire proof, but it does look a little suspicious, I can say that. As far as the paint scheme goes, there's not really too much to it. It's like a reddish-brown sort of a coloration, and then you have some black going down the spinal column of the dinosaur, and then like a light gray for the underbelly, and aside from that, there's not too much else going on, except for like the eyes, the teeth, and the horns. You do have some alternate color variation there, but not much else aside from those colors, and I think they look pretty decent, and they have done a good job on some areas with like a nice dry brushing to bring that detail out quite nicely. And even though it doesn't include a ton of paint application, what is included I still think looks pretty fun. It's just, again, nothing to write home about. It's not the best Carnotaurus that you're ever going to see, but it is certainly not the worst either. So if this is something that you would like to pick up, I will include a link in the description to where I purchased mine on AliExpress. So make sure you head to the description, go buy yourself this very interesting looking Carnotaurus, and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.